Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you are listening to us from, whatever platform you guys are listening to us on. I know I say it every episode. I'll continue to say it every episode. Thank you guys so much for the support. Thanks for the kind messages. Thanks for sharing this around and for all the emails that you guys have sent my way. Truly appreciate it, and keep those messages, keep those emails coming. We're going to go back to a topic I know that we have discussed in some capacity in earlier episodes, but we all know how important practice is, how important it is to have the best practices we possibly can, how our time is valuable with our guys and girls, and we want to make the most out of that practice time, especially as we think about being in the middle of the season, and we know practice time gets really limited when we got a lot of games going on throughout the course of the week and so many other things that are happening. So we're going to talk about designing effective practices, kind of what practice planning looks like, what makes a practice an effective one, how we kind of work on planning ahead versus fixing what happened in previous games, and dive into a lot here. And by the time that we're done with this episode, hopefully y'all have some good ideas and some good things to kind of reflect on when it comes to your practices as well. So, as you all know, I don't do this alone. I am very happy to be joined by my guest who's out there in Texas at Royal High School. Coach Carp is here with me today. Very happy to have him on. Coach, thanks so much. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Coach. Really appreciate it. I know it's a busy time out there in the basketball world and with a lot you got going on coaching, so appreciate it in advance. And let's kind of go ahead and get started, Coach, with your journey. Where's the game of basketball taking you, Coach? Where's your coaching journey taking you? And kind of what were the steps that got you to where you are right now at Royal?
So I played in high school. I knew I wanted to be a coach before I even graduated high school. I graduated from Prairie View A&M University. It's an HBCU out here in Texas. From there, I started teaching in Houston ISD at a middle school. That was my first coaching job. Then I kind of worked my way up to the high school level. I've coached at every level. I mean, I've coached freshmen, sophomores. I've coached the JV team. During that time period, I got a master's in coaching education from Ohio University. And then just as I've been going through this, I spent 5 years as a varsity assistant. Most recently at Fort Bend Travis. I was 4 years there as a varsity assistant before I got the opportunity to become the head coach at Brookshire Royal, where I've been. This will be my second year there.
Awesome. And it sounds like you got a lot of experience at a lot of different levels coaching at. And so I feel like when you have that experience, that's kind of a really good way to go about it. It's kind of like you really kind of worked your way all the way up to that head coaching position, so you kind of got to see what the game looks like on a coaching level at the lower levels, and then really just kind of build yourself up and then get yourself ready to do the varsity thing that you're doing right now.
Yeah, it's been a journey and it's been beneficial, especially for where I'm at. I'm at a smaller school district right now.
Okay.
For a high school. So our way our feeder pattern is set up, it's one middle school and they come directly to our high school. We're only one high school in our district. So I get to, work with not only the high school, but the middle school kids. So having the background of working at the middle school level and essentially working at every level on the way up to the varsity level, it's beneficial for me just because I have the experiences of working with them. And then as you grow as a coach, you can apply and modify things that you pick up along the way. But just having that experience is very helpful, especially when I go dealing with the younger athletes.
And that's kind of nice too. At a smaller school, you really know directly who it is that's coming to you. It's like a one-to-one transition. Like they coming from this middle school, and I know exactly what I'm going to have coming to me at high school, sort of thing.
Yeah, like I said, this is just my second year there, so it's good to show your face at the middle school game, see what you have in the program, go over there as much as you can to help coach them up and just show them the types of things that they'll be doing at the high school level. So hopefully by the time that they get to you, they have familiarity with what you do within your program.
Yeah, they're gonna have that exposure and everything, and maybe they'll pick up on some of the terminology or some of the drills or some of the things you do. And I mean, that'd be pretty cool too if any of those players do, because then that'll show you when they come in, like, right, they're freshmen, you're like, oh, this kid was paying attention. He was paying attention when I was out there working with him, and then that's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, most definitely. And then it's also good to just help out the middle school coaches, and just hey, this is what we do at the high school level. Try to
Mm-hmm.
incorporate of what we do with them, so there is some basic knowledge when they get to us, so we kind of be a step ahead of the curve.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. All right, as we think about the idea of practice design and designing effective practices, let's just kind of start with the big question out there, which is for you, what goes into designing a practice for you? So in general, what is your process of kind of mapping out a practice, deciding what your team needs to work on and what your team needs? What kind of format or process do you kind of go through when it comes to practice design?
And so for us, it depends on the time of year. So in Texas, we're fortunate enough to have an athletic period. So we get to see our athletes for one period a day throughout the school day. And that's every day, like before season, while we're in season, and then, off season once the season ends. And so
Mm-hmm.
because of that, before we actually get to the season, like when we first get back in school, we divide up the days into different things. So like one day will be an offensive day where we work strictly offensive skills, skill development. Another day will be specifically assigned for defensive skills. And then another day will be like a weight room day, half weight room, half getting up shots. And then another day will be like a competition day where we get up and down the court and just learn how to compete. And so prior to our season starting, that's how our week will normally look. And so on offensive days, we're focusing strictly on offensive skills, footwork, ball handling, just how to make reads, things of that nature, just trying to build their skill level on the offensive end. We'll get up and down the court a little bit, but the emphasis will be on the offensive side of stuff. And then that's flipped when we have a defensive day. We're doing defensive drills, a lot of shell to break down the rotations and how we play, or just proper closeouts and different types of closeouts that we have, closing out on a shooter, closing out on a driver, just building up the defensive knowledge for our players within our system. The weight room shooting day is pretty self-explanatory. We'll spend half the time in the weight room. And then once we're out of the weight room, we'll go to the gym and just get shots up the remainder of the period, different shooting drills. And we'll do that probably twice a week. And then the last day, typically Friday, is our competition day where we're getting up and down the court competing. But we're not just getting up and down the court. Like, we're looking for the things that we've worked on throughout the week. Like, we want to see what we've worked on offensively. We want to see some of the stuff that we've worked on defensively. So just to get a grasp where they're at, how much they've gained. So when planning for the next week, we can okay, we can move on and build on this particular thing, or we need to retouch this a little bit more before we move on. And once we get to the season, it's a little bit different, obviously, because we're playing games and,
Mm-hmm.
and preparing for games. So during the season, our athletic period will typically be spent either breaking down what we're going to do with our next opponent, things of that nature, or just reviewing like things that we did wrong from the previous game. And then after school, there's a lot of competition. Again, I'm a firm believer in competing and teaching them how to play within the competition stuff, just so they learn, how to compete and learn how to win. It's one thing to be knowledgeable on what you want to do within your system. It's another thing to go out there and be able to learn how to compete and learn how to respond to adversity and learn how, when things aren't going your way, you still got to fight through it and you still got to keep competing, one stop at a time, one possession at a time. It's something that I tell them constantly. And so to get them to learn that and grasp that, so that when you get to a live game, you can reflect back on it when those moments occur and be like, hey, this is what we worked on in practice. Just it's nothing different. It's just we're doing it in the context of a game now. So that's what our practice will look like during the season, so to speak.
So when you think about like those the you talk about like your offensive days, your defensive days, the weight room, the things that you like to do before the season starts, was that something that you've kind of built on over the years? Was this always a philosophy that you had when you were coaching or working under coaches? How did you kind of develop that sort of plan where that's what it is that you want to hit before the season starts?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to work with great coaches. One of them being Coach Bronson at Fort Bend Travis. He's been the head coach there since the school opened, and man, all that guy does is win. I think
Good
they
person to learn from.
I think they've been in the playoffs every year since they've opened, which is pretty nice considering most teams when they first open kind of struggle,
Sure.
right? But it's something that I picked up from him. Again, working from him was a great experience. Not just from the aspect of gaining a lot of basketball knowledge. Like I feel like I've met a friend for life,
Mm.
right? Yeah, he's a good dude, a good person to talk to and feed ideas off of. And to his benefit, he gave me, or to his credit, I should say, he gave me a lot of responsibility within the program while I was there. And so that's one thing that I've learned from him and picked up along the way while I was there. It's like he would plan the offensive days, I would plan the defensive days. We would spit ideas on what we would do for the competition days. He would let me pretty much run the strength and conditioning program for the program. So just gaining his trust and having a lot of responsibility within the program really benefited me a lot, stepping into set one chair over and being the head coach.
Yeah, always great to have somebody who's a mentor there that really has it together and you can take so much from, for sure. When you think about like though that stuff before the season, so I'm kind of taking a step backwards now as I kind of think about your practice planning now. Um, what were the kind of like the expectations for your guys or when you were working as an assistant? What were kind of the expectation for the guys in terms of what they were working on in the off season and what skill work they should have been working on their own before they even got to that preseason work? Where a lot of your guys doing like AAU and club ball and still like staying active, or what was kind of the expectation of what they're doing when you're away from them so that they're even ready for the work that you're going to be doing in practice in the preseason?
Right. That is dependent upon the community that you're serving.
Mm-hmm.
Like at Fort Bend Travis, we were fortunate enough to where a lot of our guys played AAU, and they were constantly in the gym. And they were constantly, working on their game, their skill development. Some of them had trainers, and so by the time they come to us, there's a there's a strong foundation there, right, that we could build upon. Where I'm at currently, that's not necessarily the case where everybody plays AAU and everybody has a strong foundation. So you're kind of working from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
So the expectation is to, number one, come into the gym when the gym is open so you can work on skill development. And then something I tell them at the beginning of the year, every year, is like the two things you control when you walk in through the door is your effort and your attitude. If you give us your best effort, if you give us your best attitude, you'll become a better basketball player. If we have to waste time coaching effort or coaching attitude, it takes away from developing your skill level, uh, developing your knowledge of how to make reads and things of that nature. So give us your best effort, give us your best attitude every day you walk through that door so we can be productive when you come in here. And then the next thing is just come in with a lot of energy. Obviously, you don't want to be an energy vampire and suck the life out of the room, but come in with
The
high
energy
energy.
bus book. Yeah.
Yeah, come in with high energy, be ready to go. Like one thing we do when we're warming up, when we're doing our dynamic stretch,
Sure.
we'll echo the call. So like the first guy in line will make the call. Everybody else has to echo the call just so we learn how to communicate and talk. But also, as you go through the line and finish your stretch, dap up the guy as you come, dap up everybody in your line as you come through, and tell them something positive. Hey, let's have a good day. Let's get it. Whatever the case may be. But one, so you're developing communication skills. But two, just to create the vibe and the atmosphere of having positive energy in the gym.
Mm. And so as is your practice planning as I start to think about this now, as you're at this spot where you have guys that maybe don't play AAU or don't play as much club and don't have as much gym time as maybe at previous spots, has that altered or affected a little bit kind of what you've done in terms of your preseason practice planning? Have you had to kind of tweak things at all?
A little bit. Like we'll spend more times on certain, like we won't move on as quickly as we have in the past. We'll spend a lot of time on stuff, uh, just trying to develop basic skill stuff. Like stride stop, playing off 2 feet, pivot, reverse pivot, simple ball handling, all the basic skill development stuff. We'll spend a lot more time on that before moving on, and we'll also spend a lot more time shooting the various shooting drills just to try to make it exciting for them so it doesn't get redundant. But just so can develop a strong base before moving on to the more complex stuff.
Yeah, I mean, your and so your philosophy, and I agree with this because I think that this is something that's really important is making sure that you're not moving on too fast, right? That you're making sure that they're seeing success of what they're doing or the skill work that they're doing, or not trying to rush through something and have them develop bad habits. It sounds like what's important to you is making sure that if you have to slow things down a little bit for them to get it right, then even if that may take away time from some other things you might want to do, like it's really important that they're getting whatever it is you're working on right before like you try to move on to do something else.
Yeah, correct. We like I said, we'll spend. I don't want to say as much time as we need because I mean at some point we do move
At some
on,
point
but
you do got to keep moving
yeah,
on. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But we do kind of slow things down at a slower pace in the off season to try and develop that. And what has helped us, especially where I'm at now, is dividing up the days into different specific things we're going to focus on. Like we're just going to focus on offense, or we're just going to focus on defense. That way, we don't have to rush through and like, oh, we have to hurry up and get to shell because we got to work defensive stuff. It's like we'll have time on the defensive day to do that. We can spend a little more time doing single-sided games to help make the right reads, or spend a little bit more time on ball handling, or spend a little bit extra time on shooting, or just breaking down, what we need to look for in transition or pitching it ahead. Something simple as pitching it ahead in transition. We can spend a little bit more time trying to build that mindset of getting them to look for specific things before moving on.
Hmm. So when you think about a good practice, and when you think about an effective practice and what has to happen for that practice to be considered good in your book or your definition, what are like your kind of like your non-negotiables? Like for this practice to be good, this has to absolutely happen. I think you mentioned like energy as being one of them.
Yeah, you definitely need to have a lot of energy. And that starts with the coaching staff, right? If you're
Right.
dragging,
Yeah.
like if you're dragging, they're gonna see it. It's gonna carry over. It might lead to bad practice. So you definitely have to have energy. But an effective practice to me, or a non-negotiable, aside from having the energy, is just working the details that you want to see within your philosophy. So, for example, defensively for us, I tell them, I don't care how many shots you block throughout the season. What I do care about is you picking up a dumb foul trying to block a shot. Because one, now they're shooting free throws, and two, you get up too many too early. Now you're going to sit and you're going to be upset. So we work on walling up a lot, walling up on a straight line drive, walling up on a baseline drive. So it's a small detail, right? But if we can see it in the game, it's to our benefit. So an effective practice for me is working little details like that, right? Working how to take a charge, working diving for a loose ball, little things like those small details that help you become successful and the stuff you want to see within your program. On the flip side of that, on the offensive side, it's working stuff we want to see on the offensive side. Like every day when we do ball handling, we add a different way that we pass it back to our partner. So today we're going to stride stop, left, right, pivot this way, give an overhand pop. Next day we might, stop right, left, pivot the other way, give a one hand pass or just a regular chest pass. But an effective practice to me is incorporating those small details that you want to see on the court on game day. And then also for me, it's very important that we compete a lot. Like I want
Yeah,
every
you
drill.
mentioned that. Yep.
I want every drill to be a competition. So we're not just going through the mall. We are just trying to go through the motions and make it through the drill. I want us to compete, even in the smallest, simplest thing. Like when we do transition cycles, it's not just 5-on-0 up and down the court and, make the reads. It's like before every drill, like when we divided the team into groups, it's like send me a captain. Give me a captain for the blue team, captain for the white team. And I'll tell them, all right, we're doing transition cycles. First team to 18 wins. A paint touch three is worth +1. A second or third side shot is worth +2. The same guy can't shoot twice. On the last trip, you're playing 5-on-5 to make it more game-like, right? So now they have parameters that, one, they have to go back and communicate with their team. So we're working on them developing their communication skills and listening skills with one another. Also, it gives them a little sense of ownership, right? That they're leading for that particular drill. But now, in addition to working on the transition cycles that, everybody probably does, they have to think a little bit and know, like, okay, I took the last shot, I can't take the next shot. Or if we work to get a paint touch three, we'll get an extra point. And, obviously the first to 18 wins. But just little things like that to make every drill a competition. So again, to get the competitive juices we have a lot of energy and they learn how to win. That's a big important thing to me.
So let me ask you about, that competition, right? The first 18 that you just mentioned. When something like that is going on, what are you as a coach doing? Are there things, are you just kind of letting it ride and seeing what happens and taking notes? Are there things that you'll stop with them? Like what is kind of your role when in that particular like drill? What is it that you as a coach, your coaching staff is looking for doing?
Yeah, so I don't really like killing the drill and killing the
Mm-hmm.
flow of practice, unless it's like something major that I want to harp on and emphasize. But otherwise, we'll let the drill go, and then that particular group, when they get off, either myself or an assistant will put them to the side, tell them what they need to hear, so they have that information, so they can make that correction the next time they'll go. Or as the drill is going on, we'll communicate it to everybody in the gym, what to do, what to look for. But yeah, I don't like killing the flow of practice or the rep to kind of emphasize something unless it's just absolute, like, we have to get this down. We've been struggling with this. Let's blow the whistle, kill it, and let's talk about it for a second and then get the drill back up again.
Yeah, it's one of those things I think for coaches and me included sometimes that, we always I got to let things go a little bit and kind of let the players kind of work through things and figure things out and compete. And I'm sure you probably could attest to this. Sometimes it's going to get a little messy or going to get a little sloppy, and there's going to probably be times where you really want to say something or really want to, instruct them on something. But I think that you really have to sometimes, or maybe even a lot of time, just kind of let them go and kind of make mistakes and work through it. And just kind of as a coach, by doing that and letting them work through it, I think you can learn a lot about like their thought process and their problem solving skills. And there's a lot that they can gain out of it when you just kind of take that step back.
Yeah, I think if you give them the freedom to play a little bit and kind of learn from their mistakes, right? I think it's more beneficial to them. And again, just like something happens, blow the whistle dead, talk about it, start it up again. Maybe two passes later, something happens, blow the whistle, talk about it. To me, I don't like that's going to disrupt the flow of practice. They're going to spend more time listening to coaches than actually playing. And I would rather have them playing and learning as they play than just listening to us talk. Um, so that's why I want to give them the freedom to get up and down, compete, uh, and just make corrections on the fly as it's happening, right? Or as they come off the court and the next group is going, and then just use consistent terminology where it doesn't have to be, a prolonged discussion. You can say something just simple, and they know what you're talking about, right? Like load to the ball, right? You didn't jump to the help. You were still hugged up on your man on the weak side.
Mm-hmm.
Load to the ball. We don't have to break. We don't have to stop it and set it up and show you where you need to be. Hey, load to the ball. You didn't load to the ball that time, and then we can just keep going and move on with practice. So there's little details like that to keep it going.
And I think that's kind of like a good little tip too, and something it sounds like you use is just having like those key words or those key phrases that you can just kind of put in there where you don't have to kill a practice dead. You can just say like a phrase, or you can say even for some people just say a word, and there's like, oh, like the whole team knows what that mean, and they can do that while they're still doing the drill that they're competing in without you having to like blow the whistle and do the explanation. You can just say a word or two and they know exactly like what it is you're trying to have them do or correct.
Right. Like one of the things we'll say is like blow by, right? Like you got blown by right there. So we don't have to stop and set it up and say, hey, you closed out and he drove right by you. And now we're in a bad situation, kind of playing 5-on-4. And now we got to rotate earlier. And now he has to rotate so that this guy has to rotate. Just something simple as, hey, blow by. You got blown by right there. You got to guard your yard and keep the ball contained. And then we can, keep moving, keep going.
Plus the other thing too, just to kind of add back to like your point that you brought earlier, I think that what I found when I really start to blow the whistle if I'm letting them compete and I keep blowing the whistle and keep correcting them, I think whether they're the players or coaches are aware of it or not, like it's hard to compete to your hardest ability when you're just waiting for that whistle and that whistle is going to come after 20 seconds or 30 seconds. I think one, it's just so hard to get into a flow of things, and two, it's like those players just know like they're really not really getting to play because they're just waiting, whether they know it or not. They're just waiting for that whistle to blow because they know it's coming soon.
Right, you're right. And then also another aspect of that is just their focus. Like
Sure.
everybody now is like on social media, their attention span is shorter, right? To constantly stop and talk, stop and talk, stop and talk. Like at some point you're gonna lose their focus and they're gonna check out. But if they're playing and they're getting up and down the court, they're gonna be more engaged, right? The more willing to listen and learn, especially if you having the simple phrases that you're using to correct them, right? And it doesn't kill the flow, that they don't check out of the practice. It keeps it a little bit more engaged. So you got to be mindful of not constantly stopping it and they're just standing around, and two, not losing their focus when you're in practice.
And also, just as kind of one more bow on that thought that I just thought of, is typically when we do that, we stop it. I would say probably 95 to 100% of the time, it's for something negative, which also I don't think necessarily builds the type of chemistry or practice planning that we want when that whistle's always going to be up. Somebody did something wrong or you're chewing somebody out. Like at the very least, if we're going to be blowing our whistle that much, which again, we probably shouldn't be, we should probably incorporate some blowing the whistle for some positive and some good things as well. So that whistle always isn't associated with a negative.
Yeah, no doubt. You got to highlight positive stuff that happened within the practice. And yeah, what's interesting is the more you highlight the positive stuff, the more likely they are to actually do it. Like they want to be praised. They want to earn the minutes on game day. So if you point that out in practice, hey, that was a good. You see how he pitched to the head right there? That's what we want, right? Or that was a good stride stop hitting the crackback for an open look, or that was a good paint touch three, driving and getting off of it when the defense committed. If you talk to them in those regards, they're probably going to be more inclined to do it, right? Or hear you hear what you're saying, not how you're saying it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, I know you touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to really reemphasize with the other part of that question. Are there certain types of drills that you feel like you always kind of come to? I know you talked about really liking to do shell, especially in the preseason, but in general, are there certain drills or things that you really always like to come back to, or almost like constants, or things that you always tend to find yourself running during your practices?
Yeah, so we'll do X closeouts a lot. So it'll be like 3-on-3, three guys on the baseline, three guys lined up across, free throw line extended. And the guys on the baseline will have to pass it down the line. And as they pass it, they're closing out to the guy opposite of them. So you're having a long closeout, right? And then when the ball on the offensive side makes it back to the last guy, it's live. And now we're essentially live 3-on-3. So we'll do X closeouts a lot, working on our closeouts. But it's not just a closeout drill. Like we want you to sprint to your guy, sprint to the closeout, have a high hand. But then within that, you can give them parameters like, okay, on a shooter, we're doing a Curry closeout, be in the shot pocket, high hand. On a non-shooter, we're doing a Rondo closeout, stop short, still have a high hand, but you don't got to be all up on them because we don't want to get blown by. On an elite player, somebody will designate as a Kobe. You got to be where he's a threat with the ball, anywhere he catches it, or he can do a little bit of both. So you can work on the type of closeout that you're giving, but you can also work, jump into the ball when the ball is moved. Like if I'm closing out to the far guy and he's the first guy that catches it, as soon as he gets off of it, I got to jump to the ball and get in help, be ready to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when the ball becomes live, I'm not hugged up on my man on the weak side. So there's a lot of things you can gain out of it, but we'll do that a lot. There's also at times we've done something we call kill drill. So I like to chart how many kills we get a game.
Yeah, I like that. Yep, go ahead.
So 3 stops in a row
Mm-hmm.
is a kill. So when we do kill drill, there's various ways we can do it. Like, okay, for 5 minutes you're on defense, we got to, or however many minutes, you got to get as many kills as you can. Or if like we're working it, this is one of the times we will blow the whistle a lot. Every time there's a mistake, we'll blow the whistle, we'll reset. So like we'll start the drill with like a minute on the clock, start the clock as the possession starts. If you get a stop, the clock stays where it's at. If any mistake, we're resetting back to a minute. You may get like 3 resets. After the 3rd reset, you lost. You got to, whatever your consequence is for losing. But it's good to work that. So in the game, right, if you're having a bad stretch and you need some stop, you're like, hey, kill drill right here. We got to have 3 stops, and let's get 3 stops in a row, change the momentum, right? And then it's something that you talk about quick that they know and can relate to back from when you worked it at practice. But it's something as simple as saying, hey, kill drill right here. Let's lock in, get 3 stops in a row right here.
Yeah,
But
it's good mentality too to always be in and have that defensive mindset too.
yeah, no doubt. We'll also do like stop, score, stop, right? The only way you can gain a point is if you get a stop and then score and then another
Yeah.
consecutively. Yeah. So again, if in the game, the flow of the game, an actual game, you can say, hey, stop, score, stop here, right? That we need that right now. But it's just little drills like that we can do every day that once we're in an actual game, if needed to, we can relate back to it and they know what you're talking about. So if you have a 30-second timeout, you don't got to spend the 30-second timeout trying to explain your point. Hey, stop, score, stop right here. They know what you're talking about. And then this is the adjustment we're going to make. So the majority of your time is spent on the actual adjustment and not trying to explain what's needed.
And the cool thing I think about, working through drills like that and doing drills like that is when you actually do like you do a kill in a game or a stop score stop, like the players they recognize how big that is and they know how huge of a momentum shifter that is to get those in the game. And I think that what that helps, and I'll let you speak to it, is I think they can really directly see how that drill, what that actually means when it plays itself out on the court.
Yeah, I mean, because they see it in practice. So we're doing it in practice. All right, we're emphasizing the defensive side of the ball, getting stops. To win the drill, you got to have the most kills, and so it translates to a game. When again, if we're having a bad stretch, the other team's on a run. Hey, kill drill right here. Let's get 3 stops in a row, change the momentum here a little bit, get things going to our side, and they can recognize that, right? And then they sometimes there'll be guys on the bench, that'll just shout out, "Hey, kill drill right here," or whatever, something as simple as that, just to encourage the 5 guys that are on the court that, hey, let's get after it right here, get 3 stops in a row, kind of change momentum in our favor.
And the cool thing too about that, as I just kind of keep thinking about that, which I think is pretty great, is like you run like if you say kill drill, that's something that they've already probably definitely like seen success in practice. So you're asking them in a game if you call that out or say, hey, we're gonna do kill drill right here. It's like, oh, like that's that thing I did in practice that I know how to do because I've done it before and we've succeeded at it. And it's a lot of a confidence boost. I think it'd be just almost like, oh, like I just got to do this thing that we've already done successfully in practice before. Like, oh, I've done that before. We can definitely do that here. And I think that could really help. I'm just thinking like mentally kind of get your team refocused and back on track.
Right. Yeah, because there's familiarity with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've done it, they've succeeded in it, so they have confidence when they step on the court on game day to actually do it. But it's even with small drills, like I told you we work on walling up a lot. Or
Yep.
so when we go defensive stations, I got me and two assistants, so it'll be probably three different stations. One coach is doing wall up, another coach is working on charges, another coach is working on boxing out. So in the game, like if the other team has a fast break in transition, you'll hear guys on the bench yell, wall up, right? Just because they know that's what we're looking for, that's what we want to see, right? And encourage the guy, the one defender who's back, to actually wall up and not commit a turnover and just contest the shot in a good way.
And that goes back to, what we were talking about with like your terminology and everything. You can just use that term and yell that out during a game, and that's an easy correction you have to make and doesn't require a lot of words from you or your bench to say.
Right, correct. It's just, again, they know it, they've seen it, they've had success with it. Now they can go out and do it confidently on game day, which is what it's all about, right?
Mm-hmm. What is your balance in the middle of a season when you're in your practices where you are working on scouting or things that are going to be happening in upcoming games versus the corrections from mistakes that happen in previous games? What's kind of that balance of, looking towards the future and what we need to do versus like we got to fix this and what we did in the past?
Right. You got to kind of read the room and read your guys. Right. So for me, I like to work on what we're going to see next in practice and the way we can correct what we need to correct, and while doing it simultaneously, is like in the competition drills, give them parameters within the competition that will focus on what we need to be correcting, right? So if let's say we didn't rebound well the previous game, right? One of the stations and during our stations will be boxing out and rebounding. But when we get up and down for the live competition stuff, all right, right here, an offensive rebound is worth +1, right? So if the other team gets an offensive rebound, they automatically get a point. So that's helping them win the drill. So you have to emphasize boxing out and getting a rebound, right? And we can focus on something that we need to work on while also working what we need to for the next game. Or, if the previous game we were taking a lot of bad shots, too many early shots, and not moving the ball well, you can give them that parameter within the competition. All right, here, second side or third side shot is worth +2, right, or +3. Or if you don't want to jack up a quick three, like a paint touch three here is worth +2. But giving them those parameters within the competition so they can focus on like what we need to correct, but while also doing the things that we need to prepare for the next game.
It's I think one of the benefits probably to that, as I was kind of like thinking about your answer too, is it's kind of like you said, right? Reading the room. And I know that I've coached teams before that if I were to focus on, what happened in the past and focused on things that we need to fix or things to work on, I don't know if some of the teams I've coached in the past would take that well or have that mindset where they may have taken a better mindset to, hey, let's focus on the future. This is what we got to work on, and let's focus on what needs to be done in the future rather than kind of reliving or going back to some things in the past. But then at the same time, I've had some teams that have really wanted to be like, hey, like we know we really need to work on this. We made a lot of mistakes on this. Let's get better at this right now, and uh that's what we need to do. And so I think kind of knowing where your guys are at or what they need to do, I think is really important, because some of them just kind of need to be in that next play mentality and really need to focus on what they got to get better on or what they need to work on for future things.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't want to kill the vibe and just be negative, negative, negative all the
Sure.
time. Like it's something that we definitely have to get this down. Okay, we'll spend time working it, correcting it, right? But if it's something that we can correct while competing and doing other stuff, then that's the route that we'll take. And sometimes it's just as simple as showing them on film, right? Like if we're focusing on guarding our yard and not getting blown by with bad closeouts, when we're in film, if that's what we're focusing on, it could be as simple as, hey, this is a bad closeout right here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The effort was lacking on the closeout, but more importantly, you got blown by, and then now the next guy had to come and rotate, and we were late on the rotation on the weak side. But all that starts with you and your bad closeout. If we correct the bad closeout and don't get blown by, the domino effect doesn't happen, so to speak, right? So then you've talked about it, they've seen it, and you spent practice time, focusing on other stuff, getting up and down the court.
Yeah, and then just to kind of add to that, if you got players who respond well to that, then when you see them succeed and actually do those things in practice, call that out and let them know, like, hey, that's what we need you to do, or that way to listen and way to improve on that, and let them know it needs to be fixed. And then if they do fix it, if they do work on it, take that time in practice to recognize them and call them out for it, and let them know that they did what you asked them to do, or worked on that. And I think that could have a big effect on your players.
Yeah, again, it's reading the room, right? Like some players will respond to the praise that you give them. Hey, that was a great closeout right there, right? But, XYZ, but you started with, hey, that was a great closeout right there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now they're happy they got that praise. Other guys will respond to not the criticism, but correcting them constantly. So it's kind of reading the room, reading the player. What do they respond well to, in how you give your response to them, to make those corrections.
It's funny. I can think of some players now that I've had in the past who are just like, Coach, don't let up on me. Coach, you got always be on me, stuff like that. And I was like, I will, but I'm gonna compliment you sometimes too. Like I can't always just be harping on you. But you're right. Some players, man, they don't they want to hear it honestly, and they don't want you to hold back on them.
Yeah, definitely. That's part of the job, right? Like you got to be able to cater to who you have on your team, and give them what works best. Like you don't want a kid tuning you out and checking out on you, and they don't hear anything you say, because then they're not getting any better.
Mm-hmm.
So just to sit there and constantly yell or be negative or point out the mistakes, you gotta have a mixed balance of calling out the mistake and correcting it. And you don't necessarily have to call out a mistake that somebody made, but you can praise what somebody else did, and indirectly, get their attention with, oh, this is what I should be doing. He's praising that, and I didn't do that. I should probably do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you're also thinking about practice, I know a lot of coaches have different philosophies on this, so I'm curious about what you think goes into this. Some coaches are big on the kind of running like the scout, running like, hey, we got an opponent that they run a 1-3-1, or this is their horn set, let's walk through it or run through it so you know what to expect. There's other coaches or the philosophy like, we just got to focus on what we need to do, and we'll be fine. We don't got to worry about simulating what they do. Like where do you kind of fall in that sort of debate that I feel like a lot of coaches have?
We mainly focus on what we need to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff that we got to work, stuff that we got to get better at, stuff that we want to see on game day. Every now and then, where it's like, okay, this team does a 1-3-1. We haven't seen a 1-3-1 all year. We'll get the JV guys to run scout and just give us a look at a 1-3-1, just so we're familiar with it by the time game day comes, and it's not nothing out of the blue that we haven't seen before. But by and large, for the most part, we spend time working on what we need to work, minus situations like that.
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting. I always think it's kind of an interesting debate. I think, kind of like you said, sometimes maybe earlier you mentioned it kind of depends on your guys, and I think that I'm just thinking about teams that I've had in the past who, if I give them too much or talk too much about what the other team does, they stop thinking about what they need to do, and they start to overthink and start to try and like think too much about what the other team's doing. And I think that sometimes can be like even more detrimental, because they're getting out of their game or their headspace, and they're trying to think about stuff that maybe is going to take away from them actually just going out and playing their game.
Yeah, you don't want them to overthink stuff and thinking more than they're playing, right? But again, it's reading the room and knowing the type of players that you have and what they're capable of. There's been years past where I've been a part of teams where you could do that with them, and then there's been different years where you couldn't. You had to just keep it focused on this is what we need to do. So again, it's
Mm-hmm.
reading your players, knowing what works well for them to put them in the best position to be successful.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of add to that, I think some of the teams that I have seen who have done really well and have been able to kind of do that more scout things that we talked about and that you mentioned, or maybe those players or maybe those teams that got a really high basketball IQ and they can kind of pick up on stuff right away and they can kind of take a look and see, oh, here's that 1-3-1. And then they can just kind of see what the options are and they can kind of get it and then they can just sort of move on rather than, maybe necessarily a situation where you got to like spend a lot of time explaining what it is and what the purpose of what they're trying to do is. Like I said, I think for those teams maybe that have a really high basketball knowledge and once they see it, they can pick up on it and then just sort of move on. Again, depending on your players, maybe those high basketball IQ teams might be ones that can really get a lot more out of a scout situation, maybe than some ones that don't understand the game as well.
Yeah, definitely. But like again, my whole thing is focusing on what
Mm-hmm.
we need to do. Right. I don't want to spend a lot of time focusing on what they need to do. I want to spend a lot of time focusing on what we need to do. Because if we play the way we're capable of playing and execute our plan, right, we should put ourselves in a position to get the result that we want.
Yep.
Not as opposed to we need to be worried about this. So we need to do this and plan.
Yeah.
Watch how they do this. I'd rather focus on us.
Yeah, it's a little more reactive when you're trying to focus on what everyone's doing. You're reacting to what they're doing versus like being proactive and working on the stuff you got to do.
Right.
So on that note, then, when you think about what you like to run on the offensive and defensive side, when you think of like your practice and then the way you practice, planning your practices, how much time or do you find yourself maybe devoting to working on your offensive action or your defensive action or the presses that you like to run? Is there time that you're spending in the season kind of refining and tweaking things or well, what's kind of the breakdown with that?
Yeah, we work that daily, but it's we'll go 5-on-0 here and there, but a lot of times, again, it's being 5-on-5,
Yeah, I know you're
being
big on the competition aspect. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So like one segment will go like possessions versus man defense. So everybody's in man defense. We're running our offensive stuff. We're staying in the half court because we got to be able to execute at the end of games, right? And you let them play the possession, correct stuff when you need to, run the next possession for however many minutes that you're doing it. Then there'll be another segment. All right, now we got possessions versus zone. We're running our zone stuff. Same thing. Let the possession play out correct as you need be. Show them something quickly, right? So we keep the flow going. Um, but that's how we'll work our stuff, man. And then once we've worked the half court stuff, then we'll get up and down full court, 5-on-5. Again, working on the stuff that we want to run and execute. But very rarely is it just all out 5-on-0. A lot of times it's doing it 5-on-5 and then correcting stuff as it happens. Early on, we'll blow it dead a lot more to kind of teach them, so to speak. But as the season progresses, you can do that less and just again go back to your one or two words that you need to that they'll get, and okay, I got to do that. But when we do work our stuff, that's essentially how we do it. Now, if we know we're playing a team that's not going to play any man defense, they're going to just sit in the 2-3 all game. Then we'll spend a lot of time, working our zone offense on going 5-on-5 stuff. If we see a team is going to press us, and that's probably what they're going to do the entire game, we'll be more heavily working on our press break, the practices leading up to that. But outside of that, we'll spend a little bit of time each day working on a little bit of everything.
And for your players, then I mean they know it sounds like they know when they go into practice, like they're gonna they got to get after it and they gotta compete every time that they're in practice. So just like the culture of that competition, like has it always been wherever you've been and where you're at right now, where your guys are getting up to it every day in practice and working hard to compete and they're giving it their all? Is that something that needs to be kind of like taught culture wise about what it means to get after it and compete in practice, or have you found that like just putting that in place, and your guys just kind of stepped up to it, and they're always kind of ready to go and compete in a practice situation?
No, it's definitely a learned skill. uh, I've been places where it was a lot of breakdown, a lot of blowing the whistle, talking things out, things of that nature. And then, I've been places where it was a lot of competition, and some places where it's a mixture of stuff. But it's definitely a skill that needs to be learned, which is why we do it a lot, right? At the end of the day, if if you can't compete on game day, you don't know how to respond to adversity, you're going to struggle to get the result that you want. And basketball's a game of runs. Nobody ever has a perfect game. At some point, you're going to face some adversity, right? You have to be able to respond to that, keep pushing, and figure out how to get yourself back in the game and get the result that you want. So it's a trait that has to be taught and a skill that has to be learned. In order to do that, they got to actually compete at practice, which is why I'm so heavy on the competition side of stuff at practice, because again, it has to be learned, right? You can't just tell them, "Hey, go hard. You gotta go harder," or something like that. It has to be within the context of basketball and them actually doing it, so they can see why this amount of effort is needed to execute this particular thing, or why it's important to not just box out when somebody yells it, right? To do it every single possession and go get a rebound, or why it's important to not be late on a rotate. It takes effort to not be late on the rotation, right? And then recover back to your guy. So it's something that has to be learned early on, especially with the incoming freshmen. It's a struggle, right? Because they're not used to it. They haven't been exposed to it.
Mm-hmm.
But as the season goes on, as you progress, and then as they get into their sophomore, junior years, it just becomes natural for them. So that by the time the season rolls along and you have your upperclassmen who get it and they've adapted to it, then they don't have as much of a problem with it, so to speak. They know, we're gonna compete. We got to get after it, and then they'll know if their energy is down or they're having a bad day. They're not bringing it, and somebody will yell out focus, or somebody will yell out lock in, or somebody do something simple as that to get the energy back up in the room. And plus, nobody likes losing, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
you like, if you've lost 2 drills in a row, like, we're not switching teams. That's your team for the day. Now we'll switch teams every day, so you compete with everybody on the team. But whatever your team is that day, that's your team. And if you've lost like 3 drills in a row, you're probably going to compete a little bit harder on that 4th drill.
Yeah, yeah, you don't want to be hearing about it from your teammates about how you went 0 for everything on those drills, right?
Right,
Nobody
right.
likes to hear that.
Yeah,
How
it's
do
it's
keep going.
bragging rights within the locker room, right? Like, oh, we got y'all today. Y'all didn't even win any drills. Like, it's a competition thing. It's a pride thing, right? And plus, in all likelihood, that's your friend you're competing against. You want bragging rights against your friend, right?
Yeah, 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 of course. And then, you brag about him and kind of tease him for whatever, and then they might be your teammate the next day. And then you get to go out and compete with them the next day.
Right.
So with a season being, long, and it's a bit of a grind, and I know that some coaches are, you know, get a little concerned a little bit about, wear and tear, and about, trying to, read the room and make sure that our guys aren't, burned out, physically or mentally or emotionally during practices. Is that something that comes into mind, or that you consider as the season's going on, about, where your guys are at physically and mentally? Do you kind of stick to a practice plan, or are there times when you might, make some changes, or change things up a little bit if you're kind of in a long stretch?
No, you definitely have to consider that, right? And so what we do as we progress throughout the season, we'll kind of taper back practice a little bit. We might not go the whole 2 hours. We may go an hour and a half. Some days we may spend a little bit more time in film than on the court. Some days, we may have shooting competitions as opposed to getting up and down 5-on-5, right? So it's still a competitiveness to it, but we're working on getting shots up. But it's definitely something that you have to consider, because you don't want them, tired out on game day, obviously, but more importantly, as you get later into the season, you want to be health is wealth. You want them to be as
Yeah.
healthy as possible, and be able to compete at the highest level they're capable of competing of. So you definitely have to consider, who's banged up, read the temperature of the room and see what might be needed for that particular day.
Yeah, I think that you as a coach, sometimes you gotta make sure that your players are physically and mentally, like you said, like kind of ready to go, and everything's all good on their end, because if you try to force that practice on them and they're physically beat up, or they're just mentally not there, it's probably not going to be that good of a practice. Teammates are going to get frustrated, you're going to get frustrated, and you're probably in a situation where you probably were better off just tweaking it or doing something else.
Yeah, and you don't want to beat a dead horse, right? Like you don't want to harp on the same thing over and over and just kill the vibe or be negative to that effect, right? So you got to read the room, read the temperature, because at the end of the day, the most important goal is to stack days, right? Win the day, have a good day, come back the next day, have another good day. And realistically, you're not going to win every day. There's going to be bad practices here and there, right?
Yep.
But again, to work your way through that and try and stack days and try and teach them how to do that, so that way, come game day, we're competing at our highest level, ready to compete.
Mm-hmm. And then my last question before we hit our concluding segment is, when you think about like your team's like culture, and the culture of your program that you try to build. I guess my question is, what how would you kind of describe the culture that you've been trying to build at Royal, and then what is that culture, or how is that culture kind of shown in the practices that your guys are in?
Yeah, so coming in and being a new coach last year, the whole year is just trying to lay a foundation for what you want the program to be, right? And then now this year we can build upon that. We're still not where I would like to be, but we've made steps to get there. Um, and it's just little things like, one day we'll talk about accountability, right? You're accountable to yourself, you're accountable to your teammates, you're accountable to this program, right? And in order for them to practice accountability, we'll do something called, do you want to give credit or do you want to take blame? You can give credit to a teammate for something that they did, or you can take blame for something that you didn't do. Early on, it's like picking teeth, right? They're kind of struggling to say anything or do it. But as the year progresses, and especially as you get into year 2 with them, then it becomes a conversation, right? And then teammates can actually, have meaningful conversations about accountability, what they did or did not do. Um, and other thing, we talk about servanthood a lot. You know, um, one thing I tell them all the time: I don't know when your basketball career is going to end. It could be at 18, it could be at 24, it could be at 30 something. Whenever your career ends, you're going to be a man a lot longer than you are a basketball player, right? One day you're going to be somebody's husband, you're going to be somebody's father, and those are the 2 most important jobs you'll ever have. And if you want to be a good husband and you want to be a good father, at that point, it's all about servanthood, because you're probably not going to get a lot of stuff that you want. You get the big piece of chicken at dinner, right? But if you want to be a good father, a good husband, you're going to make sure your wife and your kids, or your significant other and your kids, are taken care of, right? So we talk about servanthood. We talk about practicing servanthood. Like I say, hey, go out today and do something nice for somebody without them asking you to do it, right? Like if you don't have chores at home, take the trash out, right? Or wash the dishes for your mom, or do something nice for somebody without expecting anything in return. And we talk about brotherhood, having it be a brotherhood, and like a family, having each other's back on and off the court. Just talking about different principles daily, and then getting them to apply it so it can translate to what you see on game day, right? Like one thing I tell them a lot is, we got to get to a point where we're not just playing with each other, we're playing for each other. Coach Bronson used to say that a lot
Yeah, I
at
like that. Yeah.
Travis. It's something that I liked a lot and really use. It's like, we got a chance to be special if we can get to a point where we're playing for each other and not with each other. Playing with each other, you're out here, you're hooping, right? And we things might go our way, right? But if we're playing for each other, you don't want to let the next man down. Right? You don't want to be late on that rotation. You don't want to commit that dumb foul. You don't want to do something ignorant in the hallways that might jeopardize your playing time. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like you you're playing for each other. You want to do something because you don't want to hurt the next guy next to you. And if we can get to that point, then we got a chance to be something special. So it's just establishing the type of things that you want to see within them, not just as a basketball player, but as a young man, right? Because at some point they're going to leave us and they're going to go out into the real world. And if the only thing that we've taught them is the game of basketball, then we've done a disservice to them and we've done a disservice to their families. As much time as we spend with them, there has to be something significant and meaningful that they take with them once they walk out those doors and go venture off into whatever it is they want to do with their life, right?
Yeah.
More importantly, if you're able to accomplish that and you're able to do that, right? Those are the programs that have kids come back after they've left and come back to the high school games and watch who's ever currently is in the program. And then you really have like the brotherhood and the family environment.
You've built something there.
Yeah, you've built something meaningful that'll last a long time.
Yeah, that's great. Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. I'll go ahead and start here with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. And I know you've had a lot of stops along the way, but thinking back on your coaching career, what is a moment from your coaching career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
I mean, X's and O's wise, I would say, like, if you've been playing primarily one defense and the other guy calls a timeout to draw something up, make an adjustment for one possession or something else, right? Obviously, he's drawing something up for the way you've been guarding him. So maybe, throw him off by changing it up a bit. But non-X's and O's wise, I was an assistant for a very long time. So for anybody out there who has aspirations of being a head coach and maybe hasn't been successful finding that spot, man, just keep pushing, right? Keep doing the best job you're capable of doing where you're at, because eventually the right door is going to open. Like sometimes a no is a good thing, right? Like I've interviewed for jobs before I got this one, and I'd always get a call and, oh, coach, you did a great job in the interview. We think highly of you. But, it was always a but. And obviously you're going to be disappointed that you didn't get the job and the opportunity, right? But eventually you'll end up where you're supposed to be. So don't get discouraged. Keep pushing. Keep doing the best that you're capable of doing where you're at and be an asset to the program where you're at. Because people are going to recognize that. And people are going to see the value in the things that you do, right? And so eventually that opportunity is going to come. And when it does come, then you can go out and run the program, as you would like a program to be run, which, if I'm being honest, if you're the type of assistant that's giving it your all and not just learning from your head coach, but, giving ideas and feedback and just putting everything into it, when you do get that opportunity, you're probably going to be doing a lot of stuff similar, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're a part of a good program, you've learned a lot. You're probably not going to change what was successful. You're probably going to use some of that, just modify it and adapt it.
Keep doing what works.
Yeah, you're just going to modify it and adapt it to fit your personality. So just for anybody out there who's looking for that opportunity, don't get discouraged by a no. Keep pushing, keep staying positive, and just keep being an asset to the program that you're at currently.
Love it. To wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox, kind of your platform to get out your final thought, a final message, a closing idea, something that you want to leave the listeners with. And if you go over 60 seconds, that's okay too. I'm not going to time you. So I'm just going to kind of give you the floor, Coach, and I'm just going to kind of let you take it here and wrap us up with kind of your final thought and final message.
I mean, I just touched on it recently, right? I think we have to be more than basketball coaches. We have to teach them about life within the context of basketball, right? They might not get it while they're there with you, but maybe 2, 5, 10 years down the road, oh man, coach was right. Coach, everything coach said now makes sense, right? The goal should be not to just win games. Obviously, everybody wants to win games. We got to be successful to keep our job, but you got to teach them to be successful, not only on the basketball court, but you got to teach them to be successful in the classroom. You got to teach them to be successful in life. I think those things that they can take with them to help them in adulthood is the reason that, we do this outside of the, the wins and losses. And if you can do that, be great at both, you got a shot at being something special.
Absolutely, Coach. Really, really love that. I 100% agree. And I want to thank you, Coach Carp, for coming on, talking about practices, talking about a little bit of culture there at the end and the things you guys got going on. I can tell you got some really cool things happening, and it sounds like your guys are competing. They're working hard, and the results are definitely speaking for itself. So appreciate it, Coach, and best of luck along the way and for the rest of the season and in the future. It was a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you all for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we will see you guys.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.